My name is Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. I grew up in the state of Mississippi, a town called Gulfport. Grew up in a single-parent home. Mother having the equivalent of an 8th grade formal education. Never knew my father. I had 2 brothers, one older, 3 years older, by the name of David. Younger brother by the name of Umar, 7 years younger.
The ball. Whips the outlet to Ellis. Mahmoud again. Up at the top for 3. Yes! He's 5 out of 5 in this first period of play. Unbelievable.
Christianity was very pivotal. My mother wasn't necessarily overtly religious, but more so my grandmother, my aunts, my uncles, and we spent a lot of time, whether it was being taught Christianity in homes or going to sanctified churches, and a lot of what we were taught primarily dealt with fearing God. And so at an early age, you had an awareness that you are going to be accountable for what you do. And prayer was big in my family. So it definitely molded and shaped my view of, to an extent, God and religion and how important it was. Prayer was very important because we're all in need of God's guidance. And at an early age, when you're younger, you usually pray more for yourself. Please God, give me this, give me that. And we were taught that pray more for others, and there's a chance maybe that God will bless you more. And so I began to do that a lot. But prayed all the time, but more importantly also the importance of not just praying and asking God for something that you're not willing to work toward. And so it was very important to pray, and as you pray, you move towards your prayers, you have a better chance of being answered. My being introduced to Islam, it was bits and pieces now that I look back over the years. Even growing up in Biloxi, Mississippi, an apartment complex, seeing a Muslim family and seeing the way that one of the sisters was dressed, even though it didn't hit me then, the older I became, I'm like, wow, Allah was planting a seed through these images. Watching Roots and seeing in the movie of Roots, the character Kunta Kinte, Toby at the time, making salah, hearing the word Salamu Alaikum. It didn't resonate then. But more importantly, when I went to LSU, the head coach gave me the autobiography of Malcolm. And that was the pivotal point. That was what really took me over the edge and started making me think about the religion in and of itself. And just the many questions that I had that was difficult or people couldn't answer. And I got tired of hearing the same, oh, well, you just have to believe or you can't question God. And that was unsatisfactory to me. And so, yeah, that autobiography really changed my life in the way I would begin to think about Islam. After reading the autobiography of Malcolm and looking at how his life was transformed, coming from the nation and then going to Hajj, and then how he began to have more of a world view, a comprehensive understanding of Islam, it was very appealing in that it seemed to have accommodated, made accommodations for just a human being in terms of, it had more of a atmosphere of unity associated with Islam, if that makes any sense. But I still didn't know a lot, of course, because I wasn't in the faith. But just the little bit that I had read about how it transformed Malcolm and how he changed from having a segregated view of the human being into a more holistic view, and whites, blacks, and everybody a part of that same family, that appealed to me. Because at one stage in my life, I got caught up in the dogma of black man is God, this and this and this, because growing up in the South, seeing what I saw with whites and blacks, it's appealing. You're trying to attach yourself to something that that makes you feel important, So, but at the same time, when I read that, I'm like, it appealed to my what do you call it, my true inner self. I'm like, this is really the way to go. And one thing led to another. I ended up, I met a brother named Mark James, and because at the time I was still professing to be a Christian, and I would put crosses in my shoes, I would put crosses in my, because this was something that I've been practicing for years, and it's hard to want to let it go, especially if you don't have all of the information what's coming. And make a long story short, we became very close, and he mentioned to me, he said, hey, Islam came up in conversation. And I said, you interested? He said, yes, you? I said, yeah. He said, well, I met this brother. He said, we can go to the masjid and get the Quran. And I remember rushing to the masjid with him, and it was a very kind brother that was tending to the garden. He invited us in. We said we were told we can come and pick up the Quran. Picked it up, rushed back home, and I remember just reading 2-3 pages later. He was sitting across just like you are. And I don't remember the pages. I don't remember exactly what it was. But all the questions I had growing up, it seems like within those 2 to 3 pages, they were answered. And I looked at him, I said, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be a Muslim. That's it. And I began to go to the masjid and learn. And that summer after my first year, I embraced Islam. Haven't looked back. I can't say that prior to my becoming a Muslim, I can't say that the media had a positive and or negative effect. I wasn't paying attention to them as much, so that could be a good thing. Before I embraced Islam, the only contact that I had with the Muslims was an African-American janitor who I would go to periodically to just question, ask him questions about the faith. And he was my first teacher, so to speak. And it's like everything he told me just made sense to me. And that's when, after my first year in the NBA, that summer came around, I ended up embracing Islam. When I first embraced Islam, I remember calling my mother, and I said, well, Mom, I've become a Muslim. She said, oh, that's so good, baby. Everybody needs something to believe in. So wonderful, all right. Called her back a day or two later, said, well, Mom, I'm a Muslim. Who you been listening to? Who's influencing you? And I had a talk with her, and I told her, look, this is what I believe in. I love you to death, but you can disown me, you can do whatever. I'm not going to stop believing in this Islam. And she became one of the first, actually, to correct people when they would call me by my old name. She said, oh, his name is Mahmoud. His name is not, Chris anymore. Was my career affected in any way because of my decision to become a Muslim? Initially, when I became a Muslim, there was no issue necessarily. But when I began to practice my faith, showed an interest in really living up to its principles, it disturbed the conscience of, I think, certain individuals. I was approached in my career about, why are you fasting? They tried to discourage me from that. And I had to, the trainer, and I had to tell him, listen, this is what I believe in. You don't have to, but this is what I'm going to do. And what was interesting is after that, Ramadan passed, and stats went up out the roof, mine as well as Hakeem's. And the next year came around, and they were saying, when is Ramadan?
Here's the Nuggets, another free throw. Mahmoud will shoot the free throw. He's 8 for 11 now from downtown. The Nuggets a season high in threes made as a team, 12 tonight. That's really incredible, Mike.
This is a record performance here by Mahmoud tonight. I mean, he is definitely in some kind of zone. I haven't seen him in a zone like this before, but it's a nice give back by Tommy Hammonds. He's pulling up over Malone from deep.
Malone didn't even try to block him.
But even praying before games, when we would lose, during losses, they would try to make a big deal, try to put pressure on you and put you in the spotlight. We have individuals that's not being here on time, they're down doing, but they were referring to me. So you get that from time to time. And of course, after the flag incident was when my career just eventually went downhill in terms of playing. But you would get that from time to time. Islam teaches us to stand up for what we believe in, stand up for our principles, and this is what I've been trying to do and continue to this day to try to do. I began to read more when I became a Muslim, and through my reading, whether it was Noam Chomsky, Gore Vidal, I'm reading everything I can get my hands on because I felt I was deprived growing up because of my educational background. And the more I read, I developed a conscience. And that conscience led me to make that decision not to stand. There was an incident after a game and we lost. And one of the coaches actually came to me and they made the statement that we have guys doing X, Y, and Z. And I knew they were talking about me. So after one particular game we lost, Michael Evans came to me and he said, I guess he called himself investigating my religion behind my back, not wanting to take my word for it. And he said, Mahmoud, he said, well, we talked to someone and they said that you didn't necessarily have to pray before the game. You know, you could wait. And I said, Mike, I said, if you want to know anything about my religion, you can come and ask me. I said, true, I don't have to. I mean, I can wait. But I said, Allah in the Quran tells us that unless your life is threatened, X, Y, and Z, you know, establish your salah. I said, and I looked around, I was being facetious. I said, last time I checked, I don't see bullets flying around or anything, so I'm going to pray when it's time. All of those things. After 9/11, the interview that I gave, it was obvious, I had one more year left, and it was obvious when they came down. It was supposed to be more, a little bit about the flag and things of that nature, but because of 9/11, they sent a guy named Bernard Goldberg, and he had it out. I could see it in his face from the door. And the first question he asked me, usually reporters will warm you up. He said, so how's the family, da, 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 da. And he sat down and he looked at me, he said, so do you think bin Laden did it? And I kind of giggled. And then I wasn't in the mood to be diplomatic. And I just spoke my conscience. And that's really what killed the deal for me in my career. When they see that you have that, I guess, that passion to stand up for what you believe in. And so my upbringing, I was always taught from my mother and from my grandmother and people like that just humility in and of itself will take you further than being arrogant. And this life is very transient, it's temporary. And we're all going to leave it. Like one old guy told me, he said, none of us are going to make it out of here alive. So I'm in no position to be arrogant or cocky. And so I'm always trying to be humble as much as possible. My introduction to the Ahlulbayt came from a brother named Hashim Alauddin and Wali. I was on a road trip in Portland. And when I came into Islam, I didn't know anything about the whole quote-unquote differences. Been meeting a lot of beautiful people, and they happened to have been in the hotel lobby. Assalamu alaikum, because that happened to me a lot when I would travel, which helped me to stay grounded throughout my career. And customarily, I would invite them either to eat or come up to the room. But that night, I invited them to the room. We had a game the next day, and we got into just a long conversation. And we immediately connected. They ended up staying the night in my room, overnight. We ordered room service and everything, and a relationship developed. And throughout that relationship, he just began to just speak to me about Islam, not necessarily introducing Ahlulbayt initially. And what he was saying to me just appealed to me more than maybe most. And eventually he told me, well, this is, you know, where this is coming from. And I said, oh, interesting. And I just gravitated to it. And that's how it happened. In essence, the whole history, whether you're dealing with infallibility, the imamate, these things just made a lot of sense to me. Looking in the Quran, how we have to send our salutations on the Prophet and his family, all of those things. But nothing right now in particular necessarily stands out. I don't know if I would classify it as the worst hardship I've encountered, but I think the lifestyle of the NBA, if I were to say right now, growing up in the West and not in an Islamically grounded family, even though I had some Christian background, the lifestyle, especially as a young man, and it took me to maybe my high school years. You know, we know what Islam says about dating and things of that nature. And when you're in the NBA, when you come out of that culture of dating and doing those things, and then now that you become a Muslim, you definitely have to be more disciplined. And the lifestyle of the NBA is such that people are constantly coming at you all the time, and in particular women. And so those are usually, those were the toughest struggles for me. And that's why I was blessed throughout my career to constantly, when I would go from arena to arena, city to city, I would have brothers, they would meet me. And most of my nights in other cities, we would spend in the hotel room just dealing with issues. And when the night is over, it'd be so late. So even if you did want to contemplate, Shaitan was trying to knock at your door, it was too late to do anything. And that helped build my discipline throughout the years. So, alhamdulillah. I've been reading lately on the importance of knowledge, the importance of information. And I think one of the things that I didn't have when I was coming up is how you can take all of this information that only comes from Allah, obviously, and how you can unify it. You know, so many times we have specializations, you know, in terms of knowledge, and we don't have the overall picture. And everywhere in the Quran, I think when you read about those who have attained the faith, or when you're dealing with knowledge, Allah always backs it up with, and do the righteous deeds. So when you combine what you learn and with the action, like the Prophet ﷺ is recorded to have said that, act upon what you know, and Allah will teach you the rest. You have to, if you just sit on that knowledge, because knowledge is a moving force, it's an active force. And I was listening to a brother actually, and he was saying that mostly every word in the Arabic language is derived from a verb. Verb shows action. So when you take this knowledge, and even though you may not know what the outcome will be, but you know, look, this is what Allah has given me, I believe it, I'm going to go, doors begin to open. You get stronger, you develop confidence. And I would say definitely learn as much as you can, but as you learn, apply. And you build strength and character like that. It helps you to become stronger. I believe studying your history is very important. It gives you a sense of belonging, a sense of who you are. And when we allow others to interpret our history for us, we're always susceptible to their interpretations of who we are, what our expectations, our possibilities are. So it's important to, I think, for that reason, even if it's alone, to study history. Because it's an encouragement when you learn about the accomplishments of those who came before you. Allah speaks about it in the Quran. You know, there's a quote that I keep in my kitchen in reference to legacies, and it's by George Washington Carver, and he said, "No one has the right to come into this world and go out of it without leaving behind distinct and legitimate reasons for having passed through it." And I think, you know, Allah has given us this life, and who are we to waste it? And so we all have a responsibility to leave something, and hopefully leaving something worth leaving, in a sense. For those who are considering reverting, I would say definitely continue to study, to analyze, make sure this is something that you're for sure about, that you're just not jumping into it without thinking, because all through the Quran, Allah tells us to think, to analyze, to ponder, not to be blindly following, because a lot of people, they just jump into anything. They're the ones that usually ends up falling out quicker. It's a learning process. Everything's in stages. Be patient with that process. Be sincere about it. And I believe that if you're sincere about your efforts to want to know Allah, then He'll increase that awareness, and you'll reach to where you want to be. And it'll be consistent. But be patient with it. But for me, it's no amount of fame, no amount of fortune. This is the best decision that I've ever made in my life. And the most important decision, because I tell people all the time, choosing a faith or how you think about Allah is an issue of life and death. This is nothing to take lightly. So you really want to make sure that this is, you understand this, because it's a lifestyle change. And it's a beautiful change, though. So,